All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get started at this point. Thanks for being here. I do appreciate it. There is an agenda before you at this point. So, if you don't mind,
I'll move to approve the agenda.
thank you. Do I hear a second? Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. So our first public hearing was continued from the last time, which is 1517 Douglas and Frederick Tejada at 1415 Traverse Lane, sorry. I don't see anyone here for the applicants, so do you guys have anything?
So, Mr. Chairman, we just had a question for them about the units that were proposed.
Yep.
Because the site plan wasn't incredibly clear, but the tertiary dwelling is proposed to be in the basement of their existing dwelling. The application had asked for a 780 square foot tertiary dwelling. Because of interior staircases that are required by the building code and mechanical areas, the living area of the tertiary dwelling is actually less than 500 square feet. So we recommend that you grant the permit and
just
even though the
readjust the language.
500 is less than the 650 that's allowed, the way the building department looks at it, because it's all on the same floor with staircases and other space, I think you should grant the permit, and we'll just clarify that the living space is only 500 square feet-ish.
Board members, do you have any questions at this point or any comments?
I'm fine with that.
It's existing.
Right.
I'll make a motion to
Hold on.
approve. Oh,
Let me just.
oh, it's a
do
public
this.
hearing.
Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot about
No,
that.
don't worry about it. It's okay. It's all good. Does anyone have any comment on this? Not seeing anything from the
I'll
public.
make a motion to close the public
There
hearing.
you go.
I'll second it.
Discussion, hearing none, all those in favor, please say
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously, pleasure of the board.
Motion to approve per the changes from Leslie's comments.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Discussion, hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. All right, so that brings us to the meat of the situation, which is Richmond Great Point Development LLC. There are three applications that are still open at this point: 40-16, which is Meadows 2; 53-16, which is Sandpiper 1; and 54-16, Sandpiper 2. So, yes.
I'd like to take these in order if we could.
Yes, absolutely.
So if we could first start with number 4016 Meadows Street.
Sure.
You were provided with an updated site plan, which has incorporated play areas, has reoriented some of the buildings in accordance with our discussion, and I think that if the board could discuss whether you're satisfied with that. We still need additional time to finalize the special permit document, which we want to talk to you about a special meeting next week on Thursday. Get that done. But I think if, on this particular application, if we can focus on if there's any other site plan related issues or any outstanding issues, we're ready to finalize the work necessary to get that decision before you at the special meeting next Thursday.
Great. So, board members, any comment?
Oh, well, I think it looks pretty good.
Anyone else? He's asking about the site plan at this point. We're kind of good with it.
Good part of this.
With the apartments.
Just the document.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
through you to staff. So clearly indicated is the location of the sidewalks, and the other side will be street side parking. Is that?
So we're talking about the apartments only at this point. So what are we talking, which one are you talking about?
Okay, so it's limited to the Meadows.
Correct.
Okay. I just saw the lines carry over into the other subdivision, so I was curious.
When we get to that, we'll.
No worries. Thank you.
Anyone else?
The only thing we're looking at for the apartments is just the site plan,
Correct.
nothing else.
We're going to
Correct.
schedule, I hope we can schedule a meeting next Thursday where we will have a draft decision for you to review in detail.
For the apartments?
Correct.
Did you get through this one?
Yes, we're gonna go over that.
Okay. Not hear anything else, I think you're in good guys there. Andrew, did you have anything else you wanted to?
Nope.
Okay.
We just know that we're not stuck to these footprints because they may get nailed at the HCC.
Right.
In the decision, in both decisions, we're allowing certain flexibility for HTC to move structures.
Because I don't want them having to get stuck between each other.
Yeah.
Okay, I see a lot of green space.
All right, so go ahead, Andrew, if you want.
So unless the applicants have anything further on this particular?
Perfect.
So moving on, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, please.
5316 Sandpiper Place 1. Leslie and I have been working quite a bit to get the special permit. So the earlier special permit that you had received was a draft of the thoughts that have been prepared by the applicant. We appreciate their work on that. We did need to do a bit of reorientation and rewriting of some of the sections. We went over that pretty much with the applicants today. And there's a few remaining issues that we'll go through as we go through the decision.
Yep.
So I think we'll just sort of take you through the decision from the start.
That'd be great.
The Sandpiper one is the one with the road that's going nowhere at the moment, right? On the left on the map.
Sandpiper 1 South, so this is the
Left.
adjacent to Cedar Crest 1 and Evergreen. So this is
On the left.
where we have the
Yeah, that
Evergreen
one. Yeah.
properties. So on page 1, the project overview, again, is just a review of, goes on to page 2, talks about the application and its, just to be sure, because we've got some different numbers, 42 ownership lots.
14 buildable, 42 buildable.
Correct. Again, on page 2, we're talking about the project description, with a brief discussion about the affordable limits, which again are necessary for the special permit. And you all understand this by now, that there's going to be, again, we'll sort of review the, so 10 of, and I have to go over this myself sometime. So 10 of the lots are 80%. Is that right there?
Yeah, you guys might as well come on up, please.
Yeah, I don't think that's, I think that's fine.
Yeah, take a second, get yourself organized. Come on up. Please.
Like way out.
Staff's continuing to challenge my public school math skills. I'm getting better as we go along. Tougher. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members, staff. Dave Arminetti, Richmond Bay Point Development. Dave Arminetti, obviously here, the director and director of community outreach. The math for Sandpiper Phase 1 is 43 total lots, 42 buildable lots. The one non-buildable lot is the prospective easement for the road lot, should the Evergreen connection be activated in the future. Of the 42 buildable lots, 25% must be affordable, AMI limited. That would be 10 of the 42 with 32 market rate lots. Of the 10 AMI limited lots, 75% have to be sold to qualified buyers of the 80% or below AMI category, so that will be 7 of the 10. 3 of the 10 affordable units can be sold to buyers qualifying up to the 175% AMI category, which was the local affordability category that we created at town meeting under the special zoning warrant, and that's codified in the workforce homeownership housing bylaw.
But those 3 don't count for the shy list.
They do not. So we would,
The other 7.
only the 80% or below would count on the shy list. So there'll be 7 ownership units that count on the shy list in Sandpiper 1. And then I don't know if you want to go by
No, let's stick with,
Sandpiper 2.
Let's stick with this right now, yeah.
That's the math on Sandpiper 1.
Thank you. So
And they're going to have covenants, right?
Correct.
they're restricted by, and part part of this, they
affordability
have to
covenant.
qualify for local action units, they need a monitoring agent, and a lot of that, we'll come to that when we get there. So the basis of the findings, basically, this is a list of all the documents. We did include here the memorandum of understanding between Richmond and the Board of Selectmen, since that did set many of the sort of overall limits in place. Findings start on page 5. So basically, these are the findings the planning board is making, that the development is consistent, the first bullet is consistent with the zoning act. Second is a reference to the master plan. Third is that the development is in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the zoning bylaw, which created the workforce and affordable home ownership bylaw.
Right, can I bring up something on that?
Sure.
Should there be a reference to the town meeting vote and the date? Just because you've got it on the master plan, I figured maybe we should do that. I think that's important.
We do have that listed somewhere else.
I'm sure it is. I mean, just to make sure that it's in something. Yeah.
The next bullet is that the, affirming that this meets the criteria for the bonus lots. And again, that's the proof plan that the board reviewed early in the process. Up to 47 lots was possible, so this is 5 less than what ultimately could have been implemented. The next bullet is, again, using language from the bylaw about the compact neighborhood and having consistency and flexibility in its layout. The next bullet is directly related to the major site plan review. So what is in italics is the actual wording, and what follows is a discussion about how it meets all of those provisions. The next bullet is the performance standards. Again, what's in italics, the first 12 are the performance standards, and a discussion follows about how this meets those performance standards. The final bullet is, again, this is about the local action units, and these are the SHI eligible units that will be included on the subsidized housing or SHI list. Then we talk about the decision and conditions of approval. Starting on page 8 is a list of the affordability. And again, Linda, they have a perpetual covenant running with the land.
In perpetuity.
Correct. And that is the requirement. And 32 of the lots are basically considered market rate lots.
Are they restricted as opposed to $2 million houses? Are they restricted in any way, or what the market will bear out there?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, there was no restriction discussed or voted as part of the special town meeting action or the subsequent codification. There's no restriction as proposed. Obviously, we've indicated some ranges that we expect these homes to be sold for.
Do you know what that range is, just because people keep asking me?
Well, a lot of it's derived by the lot size and the market. A lot of it will still be, some of it will still be derived on the amount of ultimate infrastructure costs that we incur. We certainly don't expect these to be going up into the $2 million range that you just mentioned in passing. We are going to sell lots in addition to build some homes ourselves, so we obviously can't control the value of those homes that are built by third parties. They have to comply with all the zoning and the dimensional criteria, including ground cover and the setback. So, you know, we've represented in public several times that we are hoping to bring at least a portion of these market rate homes in, you know, in the mid to high 7s to low 8s all in. And that would still be our goal, subject to the caveats I mentioned in terms of
That's what I was looking for.
market conditions and infrastructure.
Talk anything.
So, thank you.
That's good.
So, item 3 talks about the necessity, and again, goes towards permanent affordability. This is the agreement, basically, that needs to be created for affordability. 4, again, this is more of the details related to affordability. 5, same thing, this talks about that they have to be marketed through a lottery. 6 talks about, again, this is the highest level of local preference that would be applied to the lottery pool. And to date, that hasn't really been a problem because most of the applicants for the affordable housing are local.
And they have to be year-round.
Yep. 7, again, the homes can't have different architectural features. They have to be consistent with the entire development. And then the last one is that the 80% restricted lots shall only have single-family dwelling units. So they are not allowed to have additional dwelling units on them.
But they can have a garage or
Any accessory building.
shed or
Yes.
whatever they want to have.
Okay, housing type. The first item is the limit overall to 4 bedrooms, for no more than 4 bedrooms for each lot. Number 2, tertiary dwellings prohibited on all lots.
Prohibited.
Prohibited. And in addition, duplex dwellings not allowed on 20,
The border
20,
lots.
21, 22, 23, 24, so these are the lots going on to Evergreen.
The font changed. Did you mean to do that?
There was a formatting error at the last minute today.
That's fine.
Making some final changes.
So again, and paragraph 3 clarifies that any accessory dwellings are subject to the overall restriction of the 4 bedrooms. So it's 4 bedrooms overall per lot, no matter how many dwelling units you're using or proposing. Number 4 is the duplex restrictions. So there's no more than 6 lots, and they cannot be directly adjacent to each other or across the street. And we talked about that. Condition 5 talks about the bedrooms. Again, this is basically the permit application, so it needs to include the bedrooms. It also needs to include the various templates that we talked about.
This is the individual site review
Right.
piece.
And you guys are doing that?
It's structured, so it's the planning board. You might want to start looking at them,
Or you guys after?
or you'll be able to designate, who might do that after.
So they don't get held up
Okay.
42 times.
May I ask?
Yeah.
How is that tied in? Typically, you get a special permit, and there's a site plan that's referenced. And as a condition of approval, staff inspects before a certificate of occupancy is issued. Is there language in here that will cover an inspection before a certificate of occupancy is issued?
No, there is, and that's sort of a standard procedure. So before, when a CO request comes in, there's basically a line on the building card for us to sign off on. So that's done as part of our normal inspection.
Okay, yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
That's fine.
And 6, again, is the actual parking template. So again, there's going to be, we've talked to them, basically what you saw is pretty much going to be the driveway layouts that are proposed. And if there's any changes to those, they will have to come forward and have you approve them. The last item is swimming pools, which we felt that hadn't been sort of closed out by you all. There's been discussion of whether they're going to be allowed or not allowed, so we need you to resolve that issue.
And you're saying that they can be allowed on 7 lots? Where are those
On
7?
the lots that
Those are the
follow
evergreen lots.
Yep.
You're going to allow the pools over there? Oh, the ones down on Evergreen, not the ones up here. The ones that are down facing. As I said, there's 4 pools in that whole area now.
So any thoughts here?
What are we doing different with, excuse me?
No, go right ahead,
Andrew,
it's
with
fine, it's fine.
16 through, I mean,
That's the next one.
okay, so we're not, so that's gonna be, but it's consistent, but that's still border. I know it's not part of this decision, but we're gonna have similar language probably in some of those bracket lots, right? So we wanna mimic that, even though we're not on that right now, kind of, okay. So we'll think about both, sort of, in the back of our minds a little.
Yep, David?
Is also in pools or just in-ground pools?
It's, I mean, the thought is in-ground pools.
Yeah.
There's, you know, I guess there's no restriction in pools in the other subdivision. They may not be installed, but there isn't a restriction. If that neighborhood was restricted, it seems like it would be fair to restrict all the properties in that. So,
Why don't we say in-ground pools?
Say in-ground only?
Where it says residential in-ground swimming pools shall be prohibited. I
Or
don't
is
care
it-
if they have a kiddie pool.
Or is it better left? I would probably want to turn to you guys, since enforcement and everything else is
Well-
going to boil right back into that.
you don't have to address it at all.
There you go.
If you don't want to, if you don't, you leave it to, pools can happen. People want
Yeah,
to-
hang on, I'll go to Patty. and then-
Yeah.
I guess we feel it would be better handled through the homeowners association, and that way the residents that live in that are buying into the area would have a say in what the makeup would be of the kinds of restrictions on that level. And ultimately, it's, I think Dave made this point, and I'll repeat it, it's a little bit, it just doesn't feel right to have zoning control this kind of an application. It's more of a living situation and a decision of neighbors. And I think that, you know, there is sometimes a different perspective depending on, you know, was it 10 years ago or 10 years from now? I mean, things change, and I think that that would be a lot better handled. We think that would be a lot better handled in a homeowners association document rather than this special permit document.
I'm
Hang on.
having trouble with that.
I was just gonna, I mean, I'd just throw it out there, I think as a practical matter, many of these lots are less than 4,500
Right.
square feet, is that right? So
Yep.
the other layer of regulatory control is the HDC, not to mention you've got parking considerations and footprints of the structure, so I think in the end, you're not gonna, this isn't gonna be a pool area so much as a matter of being able to have a discussion amongst. I would ask you to consider though, just from the developer side, if pools are restricted, it might push people towards the discussion of something that would be a group solution and easier for you to manage. I know in the past we've worked with, you're going to be the developer, you're going to be there a while, and putting up with pool requests and trying to address those while you're trying to stay on your primary mission it sometimes can be a distraction. I don't really care either way, I just mentioned it to you.
I think what I would like to also add is that, you know, we do feel it's reasonable if you want, perhaps, because I think this is what you began with, you know, that, you know, the percentage of, percentage of lot coverage might be something that you would be, you know, able to sort of say, or at least give a range to, because there are smaller lots, that might be something that would be more amenable to than an outright, you know, prohibition on them, and I do think that you're absolutely right. There's, logically speaking, when you got the house, when you got parking, you got the yard, you know, there's going to be, it's not going to be as big an issue probably, just given the nature of things. So I don't think we should spin on it too much, but I think I said this last time, I'll repeat it. It just feels a little awkward to me that the affordable neighborhoods, the ones that we have the workforce housing, we put these higher restrictions, and they almost seem a little bit onerous to me. Like, why? Because people that don't make money can't actually deal with each other in terms of noise. I mean, I think that that's a little presumptive, just the way I feel about it. That's whereas if you live in Pulpus, you somehow can deal with your neighbors better. And I think that's, you know, needs to be said.
You're right. You're right. Yeah.
I'm still having trouble with the pool issue. There's nothing to do with whether they get along or not. Pools are going to everybody wants a pool, an in-ground pool back there, it's gonna force, like I said last time, to look like Long Island. Everybody's got, because a pool has to have a fence, and it has to have screening, and it has all this other rigmarole that goes along with a pool, that it's going to create a neighborhood unlike anything on Nantucket, and I don't want to stigmatize the area, because it's then every yard has to have a 4-foot fence. It's not even a picket, or, I mean, a post, rail, foot rail. It's going to be, has to be a solid picket, or it has to be a solid board fence. That's going to change the nature of this entire development if everybody wants one, and there might be some blowback on that. I was comfortable with the way it's written here, but I'd rather put in-ground. So if somebody wants one of those above-ground things with the permitting is a little different for them, I don't mind that. Or if somebody wants a spa, or somebody wants, a kiddie pool, I don't want that, because that's going on in Abrams Quarry. They can't have pools. And somebody had a tiny little kiddie pool, smaller than this table, and they went to the homeowners association and complained, and they had to take the kiddie pool down. And all the little kids, the little 2-year-olds and stuff, were sitting in something this deep, and they had to take the damn kiddie pool out. I want to avoid that, which is why I'm more concerned about the in-grounds, because they come with screening, and they come with fences, and they come with everything else.
But I think it's probably fair to say that it's not going to be every lot. I mean, I don't
And
see.
they're expensive.
Exactly, and I don't see it, I mean, I'd hate to jump to that conclusion and restrict them overall. I think that there's definitely a way to manage them. They're done elsewhere and they're managed. HCC makes a big effort to manage them, and that visual piece of it is not necessarily the scope of today's discussion. It's really an HCC discussion. So I don't really want that to drive the bus on this, with respect to this particular permit.
Mr. Chairman.
Hold on, I'm going to go to Andrew.
I just want to make, a residential pool doesn't count for ground cover. We need to be clear about that. So it's not a ground cover consideration.
Setback.
What's that?
Setback.
Setbacks, yeah.
The setback, it applies, but let's make sure we understand what we're talking about here. Doesn't count for ground cover. And I don't really accept the idea that HDC reviews pools. I mean, I can tell you that they have a lot of, Linda, they have a lot of discussion about pools, but when we go to inspect them, we have to inspect them.
Who could that be?
Change your ringer.
Do you time these things to
It's hard.
He's got like 2 or 3 songs that I know he times just a
No,
special
no.
He says, call me now and save me.
You're 3 minutes
Go ahead,
up.
I'm sorry.
What did we do, Andrew,
With
in
one of the pool
VR?
contractors.
I haven't got a text on that yet.
Yeah, it's called the,
Quite good.
What
it's
did we
called the
do in
Lone Ranger
VR,
Pool
Andrew?
Company.
Go ahead. Andrew, go back to your point, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
so the point is that the HDC isn't going to prevent or not prevent pools, because you spend a lot of time discussing them, but when we go to inspect them, you rarely can see them from the public way or from where you're entitled to do the inspection from. So
Not in this case.
I don't,
Let him finish.
so anyway, I get that. I think the other thing is this isn't Pulpus. This isn't an area with huge lots. These are small lots. So it may be self-regulatory, but it may not be too. Perhaps there's a way that the board could say we want you to, Richmond to deal with it in their homeowner's document in some way, to address setbacks or something. As opposed to an outright ban. Maybe there's some sort of conditions, so they're not, again, more than 2 next to each other or something.
Well, that'd be unfair. I wouldn't go for that.
I don't think we should have any,
I don't think
I don't think we should have any ban that,
What did we do in VR?
All right, hold on.
if it's good enough for the rich people, it should be good enough for the poor people. I mean, if they want a swimming pool, they should be able to have a swimming pool.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, John, please.
Characterize it
Also,
that way.
Oh, I'm sorry.
John,
I think we have to be careful, even though I don't think this particular development is going to have a lot of pools. I think we have to be really careful in how we restrict the pools, because I think the market's going to determine what goes there. You have 4,000 square foot lots, you have the house, you have the driveways, you have the setbacks. Next thing you know, what we're really talking about is all hot air for nothing for a little little hot tub. So, and also anybody knows about in-ground pools, I can tell you there's really not much out there under $100,000. So if we're talking residential, affordable, so to speak, affordable houses at 750, 800, nobody's really going to be popping in $100,000, $150,000 pool. So let's be real about the market. And also, even though I think you should keep the availability in the homeowners discussion open for future community pools, which I think would be advantageous to the area, I don't know if we restrict or put something to state that we can't have underground. Next thing you know, we're going to have 50 pop-up above-ground pools in there. So it's a delicate line, and I think market's going to really dictate what goes on there with the pools. And I think we can handle this with the homeowners association.
I asked him earlier, what did we do with VR in Nantucket that we restricted the pools? What was that?
It's by a zoning district,
Okay.
and it's a special permit. The lot has to meet or exceed the
Certain
minimum,
qualities.
and then there's an extra 20-foot.
20-foot setback, yeah, that was it.
Okay.
So
Is that all VR wide?
Yes.
it's all VR.
Okay, where's the 25-foot thing?
Couldn't do it.
Pretty much, that's been, the
The
VR.
overlay's
district
been
includes
expanded.
all of VR and Nantucket.
Yeah.
All right, because those lots are just slightly bigger than these, but as I say, there won't be any ability out in Nantucket to put those pools in.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are more in real estate than I am, but in my projects, I don't think I've seen an in-ground pool in a house that's less than 2 million. So,
Oh, I have.
That's okay.
well,
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. No, if I could, I think other than the kind of the philosophical issue that we have, which I think is important, we get some of the concerns, but I really do think Mr. Welch's point and Patty's point is well taken, which is people are going to choose and prioritize their open space in these lots. And Patty made a good point just the other day when we were driving around talking about this, which is how many days a year can you use an outdoor pool in Nantucket? 70? And that's
Yeah.
probably pushing it. So if you're an owner and you're choosing that,
Yeah.
trying to weigh that expense, how long you're going to use it versus the value of green space in your lot, I really think it will self-regulate itself. And I don't think you want to put either the board or the staff or us in the position of picking winners and losers in terms of who within the neighborhood can have one or not. That just feels uncomfortable. So I sense the direction we're going in, hopefully, is in that direction, and I think it makes sense.
Dave, these aren't restricted, all of these dwellings, are they all restricted to year-round occupancy?
Not explicitly. We have made it clear throughout this whole process that we are going to strongly target our marketing within the bounds of the Fair Housing Act to market directly and try and sell as many of these as possible to year-round Nantucketers, and we're still doing that. And the good news is a lot of the preliminary inquiries that we're getting are coming right from that pool of people.
I think what would be,
Pool,
what would be,
Sorry.
not pool people. What would be a concern is if a lot of these were bought by off-island people and they were rented, big box, here's your pool. You know what the rest of the market on the Nantucket is, oh, you can't rent a house without a pool. Gotta have a pool. And I just want to avoid having a huge seasonal component here
Well, you
when
know,
you're trying to do something else with these.
it's actually a good point.
I do think that again, it's the investment into the home. If you're a homeowner and it's gonna cost you $100,000, you're never gonna see returned from this property, you know, it's not gonna even be returned in the rental, because this is not the kind of rental that you can get those big bucks for,
That's a good point.
right? So if you're making the calculation, you're not gonna do it, because you're gonna do something else, maybe a new kitchen, something else that you might wanna do to upgrade to actually invest in the house, whereas the pool's not gonna do it for you.
Well, I'm sold on removing number 7 along with the other guys, but I just want to make sure it's a seasonal, year-round community and we don't have these large blocks of, I'm not here from October to June type of thing. But that's not what you guys are after.
No, Mr. Chairman, through you to that point, not only is our marketing effort directed in that way, we did put some safeguards in the MOA with the Board of Selectmen that we represented at town meeting that will control here as well, which is there's limitations in the MOA on short-term rentals, even of the single-family homes, not just of the apartments.
That's what I'm after.
So there is protection there.
But they could rent it to another year-round family type of thing and not have an issue with that MOU.
And that's why it was
Okay.
written that way, to allow, I think, in fact, Mrs. Holgate made the point during the discussions, we still want to allow year-round people to rent,
Yeah.
but not seasonal. So we tried to strike that balance.
And it's not limited to first-time home buyers, this whole bunch.
Correct.
So
Right.
there is an opportunity there for somebody to buy an the second property here
Right,
at a reasonable rate and rent
right.
to somebody else that's year-round.
So, go ahead,
Can I just
Matt,
ask,
and
I just want to ask
just,
Dave and Penny
Yeah.
something, and maybe John might know, I don't know, anyone else knows. I mean, I'm thinking about, okay, I agree with everything everyone's saying, let's get rid of 7th, but what about like a size limit of a pool? Like, I don't know what the average size is, you know,
That's
20
going down
by
the
30.
road again.
16 by,
I don't
16 by
know.
32 is
You know what I
pretty
mean?
Wow. We saw 42 foot and we actually
No,
got
no.
120 foot. one.
Okay. All right, but what I'm saying is, if we had in-ground pools allowed, but like say, because the lots all the same size, we already know what the lot sizes are. There's no pools in Norshop, although they have their own pool, but those are all 5,000 square foot lots. It'd be pretty tight for a pool, it's tight. And those are all house over there. Every one of those houses is 30
And
feet high. as
everybody
big
has
as
a
it can be.
shed.
Everybody's got the little shed, that's right. Is that something that you could come up with a number? Like, I don't know if it's even worth doing it. If it self-regulates, that's one thing, but if somebody decides that they don't want to ever have a lawn, except they have a setback lawnmower, and they put the pool in, it takes up all the space, then technically they can. You know, I'm just thinking about a way
Homeowners.
to make it smaller
Homeowners, not
than, because, I mean, there's a lot of innovative stuff out there. The stuff that Jesse Dutra's doing is pretty cool. Okay, I mean, I wouldn't even swim in them, I just look at them, they're pretty neat. There's gonna be new stuff coming as time goes on, the fiberglass one-piece kinds that are bigger than a hot tub, but not a big pool, you know, that kind of stuff.
Jesse,
So I'm just saying, if that was reflected in something, that
would be
might be
their
an answer
homeowners'
to this.
docs.
Yeah.
anyways, so I'm gonna throw you my 2 cents, because I'm very quiet, and one of you will speak at the moment. I think personally, I'd like to support staff in their decision, but let's take it a step further. We've also empowered staff as well, too, to kind of net out how this particular area is gonna look. They're gonna work with the applicant in a lot of different features as this develops, and as it develops, it's, again, this is a little bit different than anything else we've done. As it develops over time, it's gonna take a shape and a character to it. Would you guys entertain the thought to let staff work with the applicant on this particular aspect as well, outside of these lots?
Yeah.
And if there seems to be a problem again between the two parties, let it come back before the board. Because what you may envision today versus what things are gonna look like as they start developing out may become very, very different. So some of the things that Andrew said, you may not want to, you may wanna look at and say, okay, in this small lot, maybe we don't need them side by side to each other. But I think since you've given them control, easy, I'm not gonna do anything. Ooh, okay, space.
Space, not in my face.
There we go, okay, there you go. Now I've got a delimited boundary here.
Yeah.
It really wasn't intentional. Anyways, so what I'm saying is just, I'd like to give them that little bit of an ability as well, too. I think that may allay a lot of the different concerns I've heard here through the board about how do we manage it. Well, let's not manage it. Let's see how the project develops. Let staff work with them to make some sense out of it. And just like with everything else, if there's a problem, come back before this board. So first of all, before I do that, Andrew, Leslie, is that a thought that seems worth?
I think it's good.
I want to make sure they're good with it. That's why I'm throwing that out.
We're taking.
I don't
it out
want to
of the
feel
decision.
like I'm.
They don't want to be the pool police.
We're taking this out of here, right?
I mean, I appreciate the thought, I do appreciate
Okay.
the thought, but to tell you the truth, I think we prefer you either say yes or no. It seems like you're saying it's okay, and the board could always open up the special permit in the future if it becomes a problem. I guess that's how I.
Patty said they're gonna deal with it in the homeowner's
Yeah.
docs as how the homeowners themselves
Right.
wanna deal with that particular attractive nuisance. That's up to you guys.
Exactly.
But I wanna take it out of here.
Do we have to vote to scratch it?
No, I was gonna say,
So we just take it out.
self-market, self-market, you're going to have noise and things like that you're going to deal with as an association, you're going to get, and you're going to put your own restrictions on it also. But again, I think there are, give Nat some examples. There's an area on the island, I don't know if I could be direct, but on Wynn and Vestal, there's
Yeah.
some
Oh, no,
properties
I know
there. So
those
they're
places.
10 foot by 12 foot by, they're very small, and they can be integrated into a small backyard if somebody didn't want green space. And again, the neighbor's going to deal with what kind of noise goes on there. So
That's actually
I think
good.
we're making a mountain out of a molehill, and I think we should take that out and leave it up to the
So
association.
are you guys basically good with that? We'll just
Yep.
strike,
Strike it.
Yeah.
you good too?
And just,
So I
we're
think,
gonna
yeah.
see the homeowners docs anyway,
No more
towards
fooling
the end
around.
of this, when you produce the
Yeah.
documents, so we'll write it down.
Moving
All right,
forward,
moving forward, so I think that, yeah, so paragraph 7 is eliminated, okay.
Okay, next is C, utility infrastructure improvements, and again, water and sewer connections required for all dwelling units, and a certificate of water quality compliance from comment prior to the endorsement of the final plans.
That's the big plan, not
So-
individual lot plans.
Correct, and there will be a set of final project plans that
Yep.
must be delivered within 6 months.
Okay.
Traffic mitigation, so again, we get into, there's a reference here to the construction of the off-site traffic management, which we discussed under the subdivision. That's covered under that decision. Items 2, 3, and 4 deal with the properties that front on Evergreen, that they are not to take access through the rear roads. That basically those are fronting directly on Evergreen since they're part of that homeowners association.
can I ask one thing about that? Would they be allowed, if it's advantageous, to have the sewer go through those roads or the utilities?
They're not coming through there.
We discussed the issue of sewer, and the issue of sewer is that they are going into, again, because of the difference in the homeowners association, that they would be going into the,
Evergreen only?
because
Okay.
then they're all contributing to the upkeep of that.
All right, okay, all right, that's better, you're right.
In one of these three, the walking path through that road, don't we have a walking path through what
That's on
would be
the
the
other-
road layout?
That's
No,
on the
that's,
other
I'm not
one.
talking about that. Talking about where the road is laid
Yeah.
out.
Yes, there's supposed to be something.
There's a path going through there also, so they don't have to walk all the way over there to go this way?
That's lot 96.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yes.
Number
that's
4.
not here in this, that's covered really.
But it's in the other,
Yes.
okay.
Okay.
Well, wait a minute. I
So-
know about the other one. I'm
No,
just
he
talking
meant
about
in
where this
another
road is
document.
laid out.
This doesn't have anything to do with that. This is talking about individual access for the lots.
Oh, I know. But is this little walking path,
Yeah,
that's
the condition of that is just basically, grassed and open.
but a little pathway?
But that's in the
And-
subdivision.
Right. But it will be blocked by a fence, but
With
allow
a gate?
for.
Okay, whatever.
So,
Okay.
may I just,
Yeah, please.
for clarity, for instance, this is prohibiting, this would be a second access off the back of those lots.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Andrew.
So that's basically 2, 3, and 4. Item 5, this is where the lots that are located, where we've talked with the applicant about this is the driveway access.
Just these guys.
18, 36, 39, 40, 44, and 45. Again, those are the corner lots, so
Okay.
those will be taking access from the smaller,
Cul-de-sac road.
The little
the secondary
hammerhead
roads,
jobs.
Yep.
which keeps the main road, Lot E, from having a bunch of driveway cuts onto it.
Good for parking.
The 6 is the access lane at the rear of the properties, and this is something that we've worked with the applicant on and taken the example from Beach Plum Village down here, with the shell roads that sort of go around the back.
These guys?
Yep, and so this describes where those are on the plan.
Which is slightly different, by the way, than your plan, right, Andrew? Because
Right, we did them so that it can't be a straight-through cut-through, but it will serve like a small number, like 3 or 4 lots. So again, it's not going to be like a secondary road going by somebody's window, but a small group.
It's like Sherburne Commons. The back ones on
That's right.
Sherburne Commons.
That allows the parking to be, again, a driveway cut not to be on the main road, but sort of tucked around.
Good idea.
What's the width of those?
It's one
One lane.
lane for cars.
So it'd be like 12 feet.
Be like
Maybe less.
8 or 10.
Maybe.
Okay, just so you're aware, we did these clusters at Nashua-Quisset,
Uh-huh.
and it's actually, there are areas where you can't get to your driveway unless you go down one of these.
Oh, I know those little ones,
These,
yeah.
and when you plant, just so you're aware, when you plant, you should go with, I would suggest at least 11 feet with
Yeah.
a clear vegetation of 12, just because you need it. You just need it.
The turning into the driveway.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
you
think-
turn in and you hit privet and you're not gonna, just a suggestion, but.
And
I-
everybody back in those little ones have fences, and they
Yeah.
got overhanging.
It's a really
I've been
nice
back
feature,
in those
though.
little guys, they're really
It'll really
cute, but you can't get back there. You
ramp
can't
stuff
go
up.
over.
Yeah, it's gonna be nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so phasing and implementation of the development. This we need a little discussion on.
That's basic.
The phasing is important to make sure that we are building the affordable units at sort of a similar
They have to be.
rate as the market. So we don't want to have all the markets built and not do,
Right.
and it's important as well to make sure that they're finished sort of in the same time frame. I mean, I think some of you know some projects that seem to be lingering and not finished for a long time. We don't want that. We want them finished sort of on the same schedule. So we've talked to the applicants about that. We had originally proposed here is probably not workable because they are selling some lots that essentially go outside of their control. So we've talked about changing this a little bit so a certain number of the lots are exempt, and then we follow a 2-to-1 ratio, I think, on the remaining. So I think in this development, we talked about, I think, 12 lots being, 13 being exempt, and then we're following a 2-to-1 ratio on the remainder lots.
So 2 markets and 1 affordable?
Right. And we would do that same process on the next one. So that, again, that would be the lot. that we apply for
So
both.
13 market rate lots could go out and give you some capital to keep
Right.
going.
And really the point is that those ones that are sold just as lots, we don't have any control how
You're not
fast they
building
build
the
them.
houses anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to get a CO, how it could be a long time. And so we didn't want to get caught in a web where we had, 3 lots out there holding up the process. So
Everybody else. Now, the 2-to-1, is that 2 lots or 2 houses that you build?
2
versus
houses.
1 affordable?
Right.
So it could be 2 lots, 2 market rate lots. and one
We'd take the
affordable.
risk if that's the case, because then we would have no control over how buildable. But that could, again, it seems reasonable to match it in that way so that the affordables are coming online on a consistent basis.
So you're going to go ahead and build those 2 houses to the 1
Right.
affordable house.
And that would be our
You're building
intent.
the affordable houses, all the affordable houses, right?
Right.
Okay.
Can I get a question on that?
Yeah, please, Gordon.
What are the number of lots, the upfront exclusion, and then the 2-to-1? I'm just curious, is it 5 lots,
13.
13?
13.
I just didn't hear it.
So it would be 26 and 13, you'd have a total of 52, 13 exempt, and then 2-to-1 ratio is 26
Yeah.
to 13. So the total 52 houses.
So as soon as 13 lots were sold, the 2-to-1 kicks in. They may be doing the affordables before then, but at that point, every time they build one, they build one.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
Okay, I want to make sure I understood that.
So we're only talking
that-
this section, there are more affordables in the other section, correct?
Correct, but the same formula will hold in
Same
place.
formula.
Right.
Right, and the net analysis, the net of this thing is still the same. When it
Correct.
boils right down to it, so it's fine. Andrew,
Okay.
so are you guys good with that on the board?
Yeah, I'm good, I'm
Yes,
fine with, I think it's a good idea.
All right,
That's why you
It's
can.
reasonable, it's gonna
Yeah.
to do it.
The last, the minimum buffer area, again, which we talked about. And we added the thought here that, so no building that has dwelling units are built in the buffer area. That single-story accessory structures, again, that won't be, having windows and other things looking over into the
It'd
next
be a
lot
shed,
would
a
be allowed.
playground,
Right.
play
Single
play
story,
set or
so
whatever.
not two-story, anything two-story would have to be built outside of the buffer area. Let's see, the last,
What do you do out there?
last section under miscellaneous, so the bylaw allows for internal waiver of setbacks only, so you can't, setbacks for lots that are outside or, facing non-internal properties, basically.
So none of these guys.
Right, so this allows the internal setbacks to be waived, and where we think this increases the flexibility and betters the design is along the front yards, where we're trying to, again, these are small lots, houses are moved forward, there's more private backyards, that's a lesson from our old historic district. There might be an opportunity to do zero lot line, a couple, so attached single families maybe in locations, again.
But they'd have a fee simple,
These
running
still
down the
fee
middle,
simple.
down the middle wall.
Correct.
Obviously, there's fire codes and stuff. And basically a duplex, but one on one lot, one on the other lot.
Right, an attached single is what that's called.
Yeah.
Again, it's fee simple and,
That's subject to your lot configuration review.
correct.
Yep.
Just checking.
And HDC approval as well, so.
Yeah, sure.
The same, the bylaw allows for there to be the ability to increase the ground cover, and again, that would be subject to review. So again, if someone maybe had a single-story house that had more ground cover, that might be an appropriate application. Condition number 3 talks about no subdivision, and that includes these units, the lots cannot be subdivided for covenant housing, so they only could be subdivided for lot line adjustments, if necessary, so
And that's not even subdividing, that's just changing a lot line.
it's just minor alterations. And this allows them to impose privately enforced restrictions. What we've gone over are enforced by the planning board, but they may have other private restrictions in their homeowner's document, that this allows them to do that. We will
Not to
get-
be enforced by us.
Not to be enforced by us,
Fine.
and you will review those
Okay.
at the time of the legal documents. The NRTA, there's a condition that, again, if routes could be adjusted to serve the area better. This talks about that in the instance that the roads become public. That's likely to happen anyway.
And the school bus would go in there too?
And condition 6 basically clarifies that the project is started at the beginning of the pouring of the foundation. Sometimes there's a question about that and, when it's actually started. Finally, we do need a condition here that we didn't include, which allows for the HDC for minor changes to be made by the HDC during their design process that might affect this.
Yeah.
John, did you have something?
No.
Okay, I'm just wondering on 1 and 2, I totally get it, totally support it, but I'm wondering, should there be something in there at the end of each that says subject to lot configuration review approval, so that it's very clear that the setback and the ground coverage can be lessened, but it is clearly subject to lot configuration review approval?
This is for the.
Numbers 1 and 2 of the general regulatory and miscellaneous conditions. Because now it says they have the right to do it.
Oh,
but it-
subject to the site plan, subject to the.
Yeah, I was just saying it, maybe you'd want to.
Now, the HCC minor changes, do you really, because the HCC is, Andrew's gonna be approving them.
Right.
Yeah, I'm worried about HCC in here at all. I don't wanna bind them up, because they're gonna be approving the new houses, which we're not approving.
Right, I
And
think.
then there's gonna be changes to houses that you're building, so I
Yeah, the HDC is probably more related to the apartments.
yeah, I think we should take that out of
Yeah,
there.
so we don't
It's
need
gonna
to-
be almost impossible for them to figure out how to deal with that,
Yep.
Okay.
because they're gonna see every one of them anyway.
The only other thing too that I talked to our town arborist about some of the trees. Do we have any feedback from him?
No, I wasn't able to get a hold of him, but we're going to continue working. Nothing he said that with Andrew is in any way offensive to us, or we have not, we're not pushing back. It's, we're pretty consistent in terms of what the trees are, the ones that we mentioned before. A little bit more diversity than we even had at Meadows One, but I think that we'll just work with Andrew on that piece of it, so.
And he basically confirmed many of the tree species they talked about, London Plane and others. He had some additional recommendations, yellowwood and elms, and was going to come up with a
Dogwood.
proposal.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Right. So in the subdivision documents, they're
Red
required
maple, yeah.
under this to have one tree per
It's
lot
enough.
anyway. And what we had wanted to include in here is some discussion about some additional trees at corners and culverts and things. So that's the only thing we haven't included yet. Again, depending on the board's level of comfort, we can work up a condition on that.
You guys good with that?
Yeah, plus you're gonna, the landscaping plan's coming back to us, right?
Sounds good.
Yep.
So
Well, we
we're
could
gonna
use
get the
some leaf
landscape plan
samples.
back.
Their issue is the size of the trees.
Would you like a certain time of year?
I was going to say, wait till spring.
October's nice.
Yeah, you got it. Okay. Anything else, Andrew, Leslie?
That is it.
If you'd like,
Board-
I have some
so-
resources on trees. You might want.
Oh, okay.
Board members, are you pretty good with everything that you
Yes.
talked about this
Yeah,
evening?
let's vote on it.
Yeah.
Hold on, hold on. Got one thing we need to do. So this is a public hearing, ladies and gentlemen. Do you have any comments you'd like to? Hi.
On TV, they're not gonna hear it.
Can you, it's really even hard to hear you at that distance. Come on
Are
down.
we on TV?
Yeah.
Then the TV's not gonna pick her up unless you talk into one of these
That's why I wanted her
microphones?
to come down, and she was very good to do that, right?
You're on the big screen.
There you go. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Okay. You got my name on trust. Alexandra Tiger Dallin, 25B, Daffodil Lane. I wanted to check that all the board did receive a letter from Scott Allen and myself dated 9th of February. You look like you might not know.
It was in our packet, because I don't remember reading it. Would you mind just briefly summarizing? Is that okay? Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, please, go right ahead.
Yeah.
Pardon?
Is it a direct email?
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
I think I did see it. Okay. But-
Essentially, Scott Allen and I have expressed our frustration in this process. We've been asked to try and negotiate with Richmond as residents and as the HOA to reach terms with them as to the nature of the development. And everything we've raised seems to have been essentially disregarded, and we aren't making huge steps with Richmond. Does this ring any bells, this letter, or?
What is
So
disregarded?
let's
What's
get, so
disregarded?
specifically, what would you like to talk to the board about on that issue?
Well, I'll come to that one in 2 minutes, but I just wanted to check that everybody had received it first.
Yeah, I did, I actually
Yes.
did read that now that you.
Okay, so now that we've established that.
Now, in terms of what we've just been talking about on the special application, I was encouraged to hear that everybody's taking note of the existing HOA terms. And I think so far as the lots that back onto Evergreen are concerned, the new ones, I think it's 20 through 26, then while I see there are prohibitions on anything beyond accessory dwellings being constructed on those lots, I think there should also be some sort of requirement that any further development on those lots has to be consistent with the existing HOA terms, which, as far as I'm concerned, limit it to single-family use.
I'm a little fuzzy on that one.
Are they part of the Evergreen HOH now?
They're
So
gonna be
what-
tied
what-
into
Homeowners
our
association?
sewers, they're gonna be.
Yeah, I'm,
I think it's important to remember they're limited to 4 bedrooms.
Sort of a hybrid.
They're limited in terms of their total impact to the sewers. I've heard the I think we're talking about these about Cedar Crest 1, not
Right.
Cedar Crest 3. But I've heard the representation about Cedar Crest 3 restrictions. And I guess I don't think that it's accurate to say that that current build-out meets the requirements. The restriction of one single-family home and one secondary home is not exactly what has been built there. There are co-op units, which are now condominiums. They are atypical of any of half-acre lots with a primary and a secondary dwelling owned by one person. So I've heard that said and that representation, but I don't think it's entirely accurate.
Okay.
And they're not limited, those co-op jobs are not limited on
That would
bedroom.
be my question.
They're not limited on bedroom size.
No, they're not.
Okay. So you would, so I guess what I'm hearing is that you'd propose additional restrictions, but in the subdivision you have, there are no additional restrictions to that.
In Cedar Crest 3, we're certainly restricted to our lots, be they 10,000 or 20,000 square foot lots, to single-family use. This was brought up when we talked about the Great Harbor special permit. And on that application, we were certainly reassured that we weren't going to have multi-family occupancy lots because we had this special permit for the Great Harbor lot, which is in Cedar
But it's
Crest.
allowed in residential.
Can I get a point of information? Just to be clear, I want to make sure I'm clear. The 4 bedrooms on these lots is whether it's a single family or a single family with an accessory or a single family that's got a second dwelling. It's 4 bedrooms, max.
Right.
As opposed to, what would the max be if that condition wasn't there?
There's no restriction.
You're on water and sewer.
With sewer and water present.
Yes.
That's right.
So the point is, and I wanted to make sure I was clear in my understanding, is that the condition is such that there is a restriction to only 4 bedrooms. And as a result of that, I mean, yes, somebody could build big bedrooms, but it's more of a, so my way of thinking, it's perhaps more of a restriction than, it's certainly more of a restriction than what would exist without it. Anyone could put up any number of bedrooms subject only to ground cover. But it's also, I think it's pretty restrictive towards what you are, as homeowners are looking to accomplish in your neighborhood. 4 reasonable sized bedrooms are not, it's not going to be like they can be putting in a multifamily unit. Can they?
No,
No, it's,
no.
no. It's,
I'm looking for answers to,
Exactly.
clarify to them. I think that there may be some lack of understanding just because we need to clarify that what can be there is going to be more in compliance with your homeowner restrictions than you may, your homeowner restrictions than you may think, and certainly more than what would be the case if anyone were just to come and build on the lot.
Because in the co-op section, you can put 20 bedrooms if you had the room.
So
There's
does
no,
that-
there's no
Still
restriction.
restricted to single family use.
Yes, but that's
Yeah, but
single
that's-
family, that's the two, both co-op units are single family units on the same lot. This is going to be basically the same thing, but only smaller because they can't put 2 4-bedrooms up. They can put 2 bedrooms, little cottages. They can put a 3-bedroom in a garage apartment or something, or a little mother-in-law's apartment out in the back. It's actually more restricted than the 2 dwellings that are full-size on the co-op lots, because there's 2 separate families over there. This is one family ownership,
Does that help explain?
not 2 families on one lot.
It's certainly encouraging. I do just think, though, that there should be a little bit more clarification in some of the terms, saying that those lots going on to Evergreen and part of that new neighborhood should still be consistent with those HOA terms.
But I think what Steve and Linda are saying, they're more restrictive than
And
your
can
own
I
homeowners
just slow this down?
association.
Let me just slow this down.
That's what
We're-
this is.
This one is abutting Cedar Crest one, right?
These are these lots right here.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Not-
The
not-
10,000 square foot lots.
Right.
If it's the same conversation we're gonna have with the other ones, Barry.
Right, okay, but this is my concern, is you're in
No, we're not.
this other special permit that we're
Lots
dealing
there.
with, right?
They're only there.
Am I right here?
This is 2.
I'm sorry.
So, her,
Not the same
in her
conversation.
particular area, this comes up in the other special permit, correct? Am I wrong or right here? I'm sorry.
The other one that doesn't have
Doesn't have
any
any.
lots that front
Right.
into.
Okay.
Okay,
That's
That's
thank
the,
you,
this
thank
group
you.
right there,
So
Thank you,
just
sorry about
those
that.
only, that's
Sorry.
okay.
20 through 26.
Sorry. So, I guess my question is, what do you want to see?
Those are privately owned.
Straight out, flat and direct, what do you want to say?
I want to make sure that those
These guys are
properties
here and not
cannot
here.
have
These
more
guys are
rights
here.
to build additional accessory units than the existing houses in that Cedar Crest one.
So, I'll either turn to,
They can only have
and
2,
you want to defer to Mr. Armitage,
2
please.
dwellings, that's it.
They can only have single
All right,
family.
all right, hold on. I'd either like staff to answer that, or
It's not an apartment building, so we're
I'd
getting,
either like staff to answer it, or I'd like Mr.
we're
Armanetti
getting
to
screwed up
address
by
it.
the terminology.
The condition the board would put, I guess, to achieve this suggestion, would be to restrict no accessory apartment, no garage apartment, no secondary dwelling on those lots. So you've already restricted duplexes, so
Right.
duplexes are not allowed.
Right.
So the only types of other dwelling units, again, allowed within the four-bedroom
Yeah.
umbrella, would be garage apartment, accessory unit, or detached secondary dwelling.
If I can ask another question, it is permissible within their subdivisions to do that, right?
Okay, we need to be clear about this because it's not being stated correctly. You're not stating this correctly, I'm
This
sorry,
is-
Mr. Chairman, but
That's okay.
the original homeowners association,
Yep.
where there were 20,000 lots, allowed
Square
a
foot.
primary
Square foot
and a
lots.
secondary dwelling. Okay, what has been built there is two dwellings, but their ownership has been separated through co-op and condominium. So that is not the same as
One
a
family.
standard primary and secondary dwelling in the
Right,
same
in the same lot.
ownership.
Right.
Right.
That was
Not
the original
condo, not co-op.
restriction on HOA. And what happened there, I think none of you have been on the board that long, but that was a grandfathered provision because the
Go ahead.
plan was a loophole
Yep,
Yes, it
in
was.
that particular
I
development.
remember it very well.
And those are 20,000 square foot lots?
Was it
And
20,000?
these are 10?
These are 10, or, yeah, under
10.
10,
10.
10-ish.
No, they're all over 10.
right. And so,
10-ish, yeah.
the 20,000 have been separated through the co-op ownership and exclusive use areas to all kinds of different sizes.
Right.
So in some cases, you have small secondary dwellings, in other sites you have two equally sized dwellings. So
Right.
it's not as originally envisioned in the rules and regulations. So
Well,
it's true that there's two single-family uses
But they're held in separate
on the
ownership.
20,000, but they're not managed like a primary and a secondary dwelling under the same ownership. Is that clear?
right, it was basically an end run
Yeah.
to chop the lots up without planning board zoning approval. I mean, that's,
Glowacki
was,
took
was,
advantage of it.
and I'm not saying that you were involved in it, or that it was anything sneaky. It was some,
But none of the current
no,
owners.
they weren't a part of it.
It was a zoning
But there was
loophole.
definitely it was definitely, yeah, it was zoning loop, it was definitely an end run. Otherwise, there would have been different rules and different regulations if it would have got chopped up
They
into
would've been
10,000
coming in
square
for
foot
our
lots.
10.
You would
Yeah.
come in a process like this.
Yeah.
That's what they would have.
So it's a little confusing because the town was sort of never involved in it. You know what I mean?
If I could, Mr. Chairman, there's another important distinction, I think, if I could, through you.
Yeah.
I understand what Alex is saying, and it is confusing, but technically, these evergreen lots, lots 20 through 26,
Yeah.
are within the Cedar Crest 1 subdivision, and there are different covenants between Cedar Crest 1 and 3. The covenant for Cedar Crest 1 that covers this area does not restrict to single dwellings. Cedar Crest 3 does. Alex is correct in that regard, but that similar restriction does not apply in Cedar Crest 1.
Who's the restriction with?
With the
Cedar Crest?
homeowners, was originally adopted by the original developer, Mr. Glowacki. Enforcement rights were granted in parallel to the planning board on both those subdivisions, but the covenant documents are different. The covenant document for Cedar Crest 1 is 1 page long. The covenant document for Cedar Crest 3 is 15 pages long. And there is no restriction on multi-dwellings in the Cedar Crest 1 homeowners association. Just wanted to clarify the facts. I get where she's coming from, but there is a factual distinction.
That's okay, I just, thank
And
you.
yet, we got 4 bedrooms restricted on this lot, no matter how you configure them.
Which
All
we
owned by the same
willingly
owner.
agreed to.
I think that's a
All owned by the
critical
same person.
distinction.
Far
That
more
right-
restrictive.
Okay,
And
but
that's
anyways,
right there.
this is really important for the board to understand as well too. You bring up a point that I thought this was a good time for some clarification for everyone. So I want you to continue at this point.
I mean, my main concern on that point remains, any of the lots adjoining into Cedar Crest 1 should still be, I think there should be some acknowledgement somewhere that they are subject to the Cedar Crest 1 HOA term.
It's a
We can't do that.
or Andrew.
Yeah,
It's just a different legal animal that your deed restrictions run with your land, and it's outside the planning board's purview to be
Correct.
inserting land that's not in those deed restrictions into the deed restrictions because it's a separate entity that was created. I was just curious though, I'm just gonna ask,
We don't enforce them.
what, is the sewer on, is the sewer through there a private sewer?
It is.
Okay, so you're gonna have some controls. As a homeowners association, I would venture to guess. So you might want to start considering that. These are 4-bedroom restrictions, 4 bedrooms on each lot. And you can put up to, there's no limit. This is a huge restriction on those lots. I just think you should consider that, but you should also consider your private sewer.
Okay.
And they're making improvements to the system.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm not going to beat a dead horse. I've raised the point about the HOA terms and we should be consistent with that. Now, back to the letter of the 9th of November, 9th of February. In the absence of any response or comment to that letter from the board, we stand by our position that no final decision should be made on this application. You asked us to try and negotiate with Richmond. We haven't quite reached that. There's reference in the special permit document to agreements with the abutting neighborhood. It seems logical to me that you shouldn't sign the one until the other one's concluded. We have had an approach recently from Richmond, but disappointingly it was only 16 hours ago. So we would again submit in the absence of any further clarification from the board.
What is it you're asking for? What are you-
Yeah,
Some
that's
reflections in
my,
the letter.
pardon?
We asked for, why did you ask us to negotiate with Richmond?
But what is it what is
What is
the
it- what do
the
you
wanna
problem?
get?
What are we trying to negotiate
Right, what
that's
are we
not
negotiating? I mean,
resolved? What's
you've
not
talked,
resolved?
right, this is what I was asking you. You were asking about, you wanted this to reflect the Cedar Crest
Yeah.
covenant, and I think we've tried to explain to you that,
We can't
again,
do
you
that.
can't do that. Okay, this has to be its own separate entity unto itself.
Which is
You
more
can't tie those two documents together. You can begin to share certain things about them. That's as far as it goes, though.
But tell me what
But
it is that's not
what else are you
negotiated.
looking for? That,
What is it
agreed.
the problem?
I'm
I
confused.
think the bigger picture is, throughout this whole process,
Yeah.
you have asked us to be involved with Richmond and to
Yeah.
discuss with them
Right.
what we wanted to see out of this plan.
Right.
Right.
We have tried to have negotiations with them as to what we would like to see come out of it.
Right.
For whatever reason, the agreements have stalled. We haven't reached any compromise.
But what is it that's
I'm
not
getting
getting
that.
met?
Yeah, please, okay, so yeah.
Because we have to leave here
I
in
hear you.
45 minutes.
No, I
This
hear,
is a public hearing.
this is a public hearing, but
We're trying to get an
I hear
answer.
what you're saying, but give me the laundry list. What is it specifically you want? That's what we're
We
all
wanted
asking.
no road access. Guess what? That didn't happen.
Okay,
We didn't want any cut-throughs. That was imposed upon us. I can keep going through the letter.
Well, that's, we
please,
can't do
yeah,
that.
but go ahead.
We've asked about consistency with lot sizes. We've heard, we've talked about the possibility of the 10,000 lots being subdivided down into essentially smaller lots.
No,
That,
That's
not
all.
happening.
that's not happening,
You got that?
We're restricting that.
right? What else?
In terms of the general design of the neighborhood, we haven't had that much say, and we're still trying to reach final formalized document with Richmond as to the size of the buffer, how, sorry, I'm trying to think of
We're
some of the
doing
other terms of the agreement, and maybe some compensation for the lots that we aren't gonna be having contribute to our HOA term dues anymore. And all these things, we believe, should be done and dusted before you put your final signatures on this special application.
I thought
I
the
think-
contribution was already worked out.
Buffer.
Wasn't the contribution
The
for
buffer
taking
was-
the lots out
was
of that
20
homeowner was
foot.
already worked out?
Yeah, Mr. O'Malley.
Yeah.
The last paragraph from Mr. Hill states, I suggest that we continue work on the agreement we started a couple months ago. If the mitigation payment and the eminent domain issues are the only sticking points, we should be able to bridge the gap. If we both set aside time to work on this, we should well in advance of town meeting and the filing of the special permit decisions, which I know is your objective.
So sticking point, could you?
Mitigation payment. Mitigation payment.
Yeah, that's already been working out. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I haven't had the courtesy of calling that. What time did that come in?
That was from Dan Hill to, Andrew York, and seeing who else you,
That was a couple of days ago, wasn't it?
and now is today, the 16th? At 3:39.
So 3:39, I was clearly in my way here
Yeah.
before that, so
So
I
that-
haven't heard
So I
that.
just wanted to, edify everybody.
That's, and to be clear, Attorney Hill is Cedar Crest 3's lawyer, reaching out, or at least specifying to Richmond that, yes, we see some agreement possibly being concluded, but we're not there yet. I'm sorry if this is becoming frustrating, but, we want to stand up for our neighborhood rights.
Well, in our opinion, from his letter, we're well on our way, number one, and number two.
Well, perhaps you should have called us before Lynn called.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
All right,
Hold
we
on,
can't
hold
have
on,
this back
hold
and
on.
forth.
This is all gonna go, this goes, I understand your frustration. I understand your frustration. I just want to make sure at this point that it's not gonna be a back and forth between the parties. It all goes through me. So, okay. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm not taking sides with it, but I think if there is if we're signing one that says an agreement's been made with the neighbors, and this one is an issue. But the letter that was just read, I believe said that the mitigation and something else were sticking points. So clearly they haven't been resolved. So just because they're talking about them doesn't mean they're resolved. So I just want to be clear.
And Dave can jump. They gave, and again, this is probably outside the discussion purview scope of the group. This is between us and the neighbors, at many levels, but, we did receive a letter that I don't have to quote from, that set a number in terms of mitigation payment. We agreed to that number, so that's not, the other issue Dave can speak more clearly to, we're talking about, is about the access rights to the cul-de-sacs, which is what all this hangs on with
Yeah.
respect to this. So the access rights to the cul-de-sacs, we're trading on a mitigation payment to the neighborhood, basically. So we're not just handing them a check, we're trading their support
Right.
for that.
Right.
So that's all that's pending, Steve.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
But that's not,
They've been 100% okay to the number that they put in front of us.
but that's not part of this permit, right?
Right.
Yeah, and please, go ahead.
Again,
Andrew.
Mr. Chairman, we're on to the second application. We're
Right.
we're outside of the first one.
Let's stay in the first one.
And if we can't stick to focusing on what's before us, it's starting to get all mixed up.
It is.
The issue about,
Yeah.
this other issue is about the Cedar Crest 3, that's 5416, we're on 5360
Correct, yeah.
at this moment. And if we could keep our comments on that subdivision,
Right.
we could then have the further discussion on this one.
So
Right.
can you clarify the letter that Patty just read? Is that with regards to the one we're speaking of now or the one we're going to speak about later?
That's 5416, which we have.
Okay, so that letter isn't relevant to what Ms.
Okay.
Allen was saying.
Please.
What's relevant to what
Okay.
Ms. Allen is saying
Yeah.
is she's asking for a further restriction on the lots fronting on Evergreen to be what I said, to restrict them from any additional dwelling units such as an accessory apartment, a second dwelling, or a garage apartment.
Is that for representation?
Thank you for, I'm just trying to get clear on this because it's,
Okay.
Is that for representation?
Yes.
Okay.
The only comment I was going to say, yes, the letter that Patty has read out does mainly apply to Cedar Crest 3 and therefore the Sandhill Place 2 development. Our overall negotiations with Richmond have specifically mentioned the points such as the lots on Evergreen, which is why I raised the matter now. I can come back when we get onto the application. The point will remain the same. We don't believe that the special permit should be signed off until
Okay.
agreements are reached with Richmond.
Okay.
However, this special permit, we're dealing with just Sandpiper 1 right now.
Correct.
That's it.
Correct. Okay. Was there anything else you had? No. Okay. Anyone else wanting to comment on this? Mary, come on down, please. Thank you.
Come on down. You have to come up here because
Yeah,
it's on
sorry,
the,
dear.
it's on the TV thing.
it's not easy to come up here and talk.
No, no.
No, No, they don't have microphones out there.
It's not bad, but they did his job. It is what it is.
Good afternoon. Mary Malavey, 6 Skyline. I have a very minor point.
Yes, ma'am.
Through the chair for clarification. In the packet, I'm talking about landscaping now.
The
Like
important
light
stuff.
and tree. Well, it's very important.
It is.
The easement that's been granted for Clay, I understand, that's there. It'll be there. Hopefully I won't be around when it's open, but it'll be there.
Most of us won't.
All right, let it finish.
In one landscape map, it shows the easement not planted with the community garden. In another map, it shows it planted.
Yeah.
I would prefer that it be planted totally. That's the second map in the packet. It's in the packet, considering it's down next to the playground.
This is in,
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
yeah,
This is application 40-16,
Oh, that's not the apartment.
which we are going to be discussing next Thursday. We
Right.
can certainly answer the question now, but it's not on the issue that's before you.
right.
So even though it's part of the apartments,
We're here.
We're really
trying to
just,
show
we're
us
just
more
really
on the
focusing on the
Mary,
sand
we're
pipe.
not there. We're
That's
here.
okay, but
We're at the house.
you want to hold this tape? No.
you do me a favor, Ken.
But do you understand where I'm coming from?
Yes.
It's more of a clarification
If
from
you
the
can do-
packet.
If you can do the brief Reader's Digest. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Since
Through
it's
you.
there.
We just didn't want to misrepresent on the graphic as if the potential connection went away or wouldn't occur in the future. Our anticipation would be, in the interim period until that connection's made, that would all be some type of green space, whether it be planted community garden or some type of landscaped open space area. It won't be a blank space with gravel or,
It's just, there's two different maps in the packet that went to this meeting.
Okay.
correct. At first, we had shown it kind of as one consolidated area, and then actually staff made the point that might be misleading to people and give them the impression that the connection may not go through in the future, so we corrected it.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that
That's,
next
that's my
week.
garden club hat, because next to the playground, you want community gardens.
Quickly, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, we don't want to put a community garden in the way of a potential connection.
Yes.
Only for that to be brought up as a reason to say you can't make the connection.
And I would agree 100%
That's-
with that.
Right, well, we can go talk that over Thursday.
And we'll be talking about it Thursday, but I agree with you. Okay, so on this particular application, is there anything else that's before us at the moment? Is there any further public comment? Hearing no further comment at this point. What's the pleasure of the
I'll
board?
make a motion to close the public hearing on this one.
Okay, do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, accept unanimously, and
Is this something we want to get a final draft on and sign it next Thursday, or do we want to just approve it now with the changes, the modifications that we've
I
talked
think if you
about?
close the public hearing, you'll want to approve it. Is what I'm rather gathering.
Right, there's no more testimony.
We know.
No more testimony, I know that.
Mr. Chairman, we would like for you to include in your motion that minor changes may be made to the decision from what you've seen, nothing substantive.
Sure.
Okay.
Right.
And the town council may have
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve striking that number 7 in that section
Yep,
and not adding the HDC paragraph.
right.
And there's other minor immaterial changes made between now and final signature.
Okay, got it. Motion's made, second, discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, accept unanimously, okay. Brings us to 5416, Sandpiper 2.
Do I have another one for that in here?
So,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, we do not have a written decision for you on this one.
Yep.
This is number 2, right?
This
Number
is,
two?
this is number 2. So this is the group that includes the cul-de-sacs that were mentioned in the letter. It includes lots that were subject to the Cedar Crest 3 deed restrictions. The issue on this, I mean, we would propose that we would follow the general sort of outline with adjustments here. I mean, there are no lots that are fronting here in this group. There are no lots that are fronting onto Cedar Crest 3 roadways. They are reoriented out of that subdivision and will front on basically the Sandpiper group.
So,
This is the Mayflower Daffy ends.
right, so this ends the cul-de-sacs, removes the cul-de-sacs. Again, those were roads that could have been built out with houses, so the traffic from those is now reoriented. Sewer and other issues are reoriented to a new group. So, I'm not sure what other issues, that decision will follow the basic decision as this. And again, we will get that prepared.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything different on this, unless you want any different conditions. If there's anything in this particular group, we've already discussed the limitation on the duplexes. So there's a different number here. The number is 9, I believe, in this. And the only
same
thing,
rate of building phasing.
again, we'll
Yep.
follow the same formula unless there's any suggestion not to. There is an alley behind lots 82 through 86, again, to provide rear access. That needs to be shown on the site plan. And a portion of the roadway, of the rear lot, or the parking lane behind lots 63 to 66 would be eliminated. So, other than that, we would prepare decisions, fairly similar to the other one.
I'm fine with that, but I'd like to, I think we ought to have it in our hand before we
You will.
close the hearing even.
Okay.
Well, I'm only saying that because, people should get the chance to see it. And,
So,
But for overall guidance.
But
at this
I'd say,
point-
yeah, I'm ready to go. If it was like some other typical things, I'd say, yeah, let's finish it up. But
so Thursday, we'll have a decision in final form for you,
yeah,
unless there's any further direction on that.
no, I think I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that clearly seems to be, Mr. Chairman, the direction of the board. We'll work diligently with the staff over the next few days to finish it up, just as we did with Sandpiper 1.
All right, so this is a public hearing still on this particular subdivision, so again, if anyone would, do you want? Hate to bring you down.
I have a question.
Yeah. Can you hold on for 1 second? Thanks, I'm sorry.
I'm just in anticipation of if this is going to be part of the discussion, which I wasn't, the kind of negotiation with the neighbor is
Yep.
something that's, we're going essentially through, obviously, the decisions on the access. I don't know, and this is a question to Andrew through you, Mr. Chairman. If you are going to delve into this, which I didn't expect necessarily as part of this special permit, do we need to bring attorneys into the room next week? I mean, I don't want to be in a position where we're not, again, I would consider this not necessarily an impediment to your decision with respect to the special permit as to whether or not we've made this, agreement happen.
I don't think it should be in any of our decisions that they're
Right.
they're doing
No,
a private agreement.
Right.
Because
No,
it really
I agree.
behooves you guys to all do
But
that together, but if not, it shouldn't be in here.
Right, but when I hear that there's no communication going on, of course that raises the specter of issues, right,
I didn't hear that. I heard it wasn't what they
Well,
wanted.
that's, yeah,
Well, if I can speak to that, Mr. Chairman, since
Yes.
obviously we didn't voice our side. As we explained to the applicant, we have been very busy with this piece of the project.
Right.
So
Right.
we have a single in-house counsel, and I also have emails on numerous occasions where I've reached out, and they've not been able to meet with us. So
Okay.
I think it's fair to say that we could have been a little faster had we had not all this work to do, so I don't mean to dismiss what Alex has said, but I also think it's fair to say that it's not as though nothing has happened. And I do think that ultimately, we are dealing with a situation where we received essentially a demand letter that we had to go through some due diligence as to where we would land with it, and that is part of, including, a payment mitigation.
Right.
So none of that can happen overnight.
I understand.
So
It's not
I'm
a
just
decision.
wondering, with respect, that's my impression exactly, that it's not part of this decision, and while it's part of public comment, I'm just a little concerned, without closing the hearing today, what might come of this next week, and I want to be prepared.
Go ahead, Andrew, because I think you're going to say exactly what I'm going to say. but
Okay,
go
well,
ahead.
Mr. Chairman, we have a responsibility to do our work.
Correct.
Okay, we have an application, we have a time frame that we're working in, we're already over that time frame right now. We can't condition our work and our decisions based on private concerns. Just like we can't enforce private deed restrictions and all kinds of other things. It behooves the parties to get together and work these agreements out. I also think that some of the things that have been said, the board has worked very hard to mitigate the concerns that are continually expressed. However, the board also operates with rules and regulations, and, you know, not all private concerns are going to be met here. It's unrealistic. The people, as much as the people in the existing neighborhoods have rights, the people who will live in this have rights as well. And this discussion has been vetted over 2 or 3 town meetings. There has been discussion about this. I understand that there's, you know, there are issues that the board has basically agreed to modify its conditions quite substantially. And you know, at some point, this needs to move on.
Right.
So there's another week here for the parties to talk and update the board, but you can't wait on private matters. We're at the end.
I agree that we're at the end, absolutely.
Yeah, and I will commend you. That was actually very eloquently put. I don't think I could have done as well with that, but you're 100% correct. There are plenty of decisions that we have done in the past where there's still a potential quandary between the two parties, but as far as the planning board is concerned, its work is done. If it goes to litigation, then it may be remanded back to the board. So I just need you to understand, Andrew's 100% correct on this, is that there's a certain point where we have done our work to the best of our ability. There may not be matters that will always come before it that we can or have to necessarily resolve, but that's why you have lawyers available under which to do it.
If I could add to, and this is, I think, important for us to state, if the planning board as a whole, in the interests of the community of Nantucket, has put restrictions and/or things like walking paths onto our application, and those are things that are still contended by the neighbors, we are really between a rock and a hard place here.
Oh, right.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so the outstanding issues, believe it or not, are those that we feel we
You can't do anything about that.
we can't do
Correct.
anything about.
And to my opinion, that's the most ridiculous opposition issues.
Well, yeah, we don't have to get into that. Let's
I know.
not
We don't
inflame- let's
have
not
to get
inflame
into
things.
Right, we don't have to
Okay.
get,
Those
we don't,
two
Don't
things.
but
get
we don't have
involved.
to get
Not
into
getting
the,
involved.
we don't have to get into the
Yeah, it's
private.
good.
That's part
personal.
of our
It
application.
No.
can,
I mean, our
Just-
decision. Excuse me.
now, I mean,
No, it's not.
all right, now respectfully, I'd probably say, I hear what you're saying.
Or not.
I hear what you're saying. I think probably maybe the better way to look at it is there are certain obligations that this board has to meet for the public of Nantucket as well. They may not always be the most likable decisions at times, but again, we've got to look at it through a different set of filters as well too. It's not only just the abutting community, it's the rest of the town, as well as those people who are going to be moving into that area in the future that we have to look
Right.
at. So there's a balance that has to be achieved.
And if I can say about the cul-de-sacs, I mean, the interest is not a fee interest, as you know. It's an interest of access. And that in many respects, that access could have been granted by simply putting the road through. And we know that the neighborhood wouldn't want that. So we're trying our best to mitigate this in a way.
That wasn't put through by the previous owner. That's the
But
case.
anyways, I'm sorry, yes, go ahead.
I respectfully hear what Mr. Morse has to say, you have to say, Patty has to say. The permission you're being asked to grant by your special application presupposes those lots being able to be used such as they are being put forward for Richmond. And we believe that we have an interest in the roads. We don't think that the lots can just be, made up as Richmond had put forward, and that is like the crux of what we've been trying to discuss with them, without having to resort to further legal steps. So I bring it to your attention that if you're going to approve an application where there's a very real question as to the actual rights of the land in question, you're putting the cart before the horse.
But I don't understand what you want.
Hold on.
What is the
Can you hold
problem?
on for one second, please?
I don't get it.
I just want to make, are you set for the moment before she starts?
Well,
Go
I
ahead.
just want to know what the
Did you,
issue is.
did you have,
And just to be perfectly
Yes, ma'am.
clear, yes, that the planning board is under, a deadline, and with all respect, Richmond have been the ones dragging their feet on this. Everything could have been done and dusted months and months ago. So what Patty has been saying isn't entirely accurate. I'm not gonna get into a.
Let's not do that.
But I asked
just-
a question, Barry.
I know
and
you did,
just
I know,
don't understand
I
it.
just want to be fair to her for a few seconds, please. Go ahead.
So the point is, we don't want to restrict affordable housing on the island. We're totally for it. We just want to protect our private rights in our neighborhood, which the planning board 20 years ago gave to us. So why is it such a big issue for those rights now just to be overlooked?
But what is it, what are the rights that, I've not understood it from the beginning. We cut off the road when they first came in here. They had the access road going through Mayflower, Daffy, one of them. And we took them, hold on, I waited for you. We cut them off. We said, no, we don't want any direct access over there, and until the town, whenever, takes Evergreen and Daffy, they're not gonna be able to come through on the other one. So we cut off all vehicular access, which right at the beginning was the major problem, was that drive-through. And we've given buffer zones for all those lots. And all we have is a walking path. So more than likely, the kids or whoever in here are going to go that way, as opposed to them walking to the airport. That's not gonna be, that's not practical. So they're gonna be walking to the market or whatever the stores, or you guys walking to the restaurant over there, so you don't have to go out, around, drive to it. What is it that is causing still the problem over there, because we haven't touched any of the lots? What is the problem with Cedar Crest 2 over there?
Cedar Crest 3.
Okay, which is over here. What's the problem over here? There's no vehicular access.
No, the issue is that the bulbs that have been cut off for this development,
At the end of Mayflower and the end of Daffy.
part of those still very much belong to Cedar Crest 3. There is an argument over the fee on those.
Okay.
And who owns the control on those? I
Yeah.
believe that was established a
So-
long time ago.
No,
Can I,
Not to your satisfaction, I got that.
can I turn?
What's in dispute?
it's
Right.
in dispute, and our lawyer has set out our position.
Right. So let me turn
Which
to.
we've seen in
Let
his
me,
stuff to us.
please, let me turn to Andrew.
Mr. Chairman, I understand the issue, and I think it is an issue. There's no question that there's an issue of rights to go into a dead-end street and around a cul-de-sac. However, I'm having trouble just because that right is there. Is that being used because there's a concern that you still want to do that? Or is that being brought up as a way to just prevent this from moving forward? If the road is kept in its place, then there will be development along that road, one way or the other, that will feed back in to the Cedar Crest 3 neighborhood. So while I understand it, I don't understand the importance of it.
Go ahead. So, Patty, if you don't mind, just give me a sec. Go ahead.
Everybody who purchased in Cedar Crest 3 has a right to have the basis on which they bought into it upheld.
Which is,
What does it have to do
That
with
there was
cutting off of
cul-de-sacs
those
there.
cul-de-sacs?
First of all, that they bought into a development that was going to be developed, and now it's being massively changed.
But how? I'm just talking about that section, forget the other side. How is that we're on just that decision. How is Cedar Crest 3 or 2, whatever, being changed by cutting off the hammerheads? It's not.
Well, the single-family lots, be they 20,000 or to 10,000 lots, are no longer there. We're not going to have those people contributing to our HOA fees.
Well, that's where the agreement to pay for the mitigation comes
Well, yeah,
in.
no, let her finish.
let her finish, though. Let her finish, please.
We have had to deal with the possibility of road access being put straight down there, which is what was originally proposed, and yes, thankfully that has been cut off, but we are now having to have pedestrian access, which, yes, there may be some benefits to it. But the point is, we have private contractual rights, and for whatever, motivation who wants what for them, we have a right to.
But you have to also show, if you were to go to court, more than likely, we've been through this a million times in court, you have to show how you were aggrieved by cutting off those hammerheads. And I have a hard time with that.
We have HOA deeds which cannot be amended without all the homeowners being, essentially giving their yes to. Our mortgage companies have all provided mortgages on those basis. So, yes, we might have to prove to a court how we're being agreed, but I believe that we can. It's not for me to have to prove to the board that.
So, hold on.
Go ahead.
Can I get a clarification on that?
I'll allow clarification.
Because I think it might be relevant. I'm not to belabor it, but so are you saying, Alex, that because those lots are no longer there, but they're listed in your deed restrictions, it puts you guys in a bind with making changes to your homeowner association?
Well, they're certainly still part of Cedar Crest 3. Somehow they have to be taken out of Cedar Crest 3. This is part of the discussions that we've been having. Who deals with it? This is why Ms. Rogovy has put forward her own citizen's petition to have those stubs taken out of the Cedar Crest 3 by basis of an eminent domain article.
Go ahead. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Just trying to understand.
That's
There,
okay.
no, just cut the roof.
That's, Patty, speak.
Basically, the planning board is here to discern use. The title discussions on these properties is for a court and for lawyers and for our agreement. It doesn't belong here. And the fact that it's being dragged here is a little bit disconcerting because we don't have our lawyer here, and statements can be made and the press is here. So I'm getting a little
I
bit
understand.
concerned, frankly,
Yeah.
because it's prejudicing what we're putting forward with respect to this. And I think that we can all agree that we have a whole different perception of what the ownership is. There are no fee ownerships in those cul-de-sacs. The fee ownership belongs to Richmond. There's an access, that's
Right.
all. And that's
So-
a different
Drive that road
animal.
right on through there as a matter of right.
Please understand at this point, when it comes to, again, there are certain times when it is between the two parties doing that. And again, the outcome of that has got to be settled between the two parties. The planning board can only move ahead with what is available. They're not allowed to stall that out. And like I said, even after the decision is done, depending, and again, the applicant always wants to try to move forward, not having to go to court and deal with it, or having it remanded back to the planning board. Excuse me, or having it remanded back to the planning board. Believe me, they want to do that because that is time, it's energy, it's labor. It is a potential unknown outcome. But this board, and for as long as I've been sitting on it, and that has been a consistent theme, we cannot be the litigators in that. So please understand that. And I hear what Patty's saying. You could bring those concerns forward, but if you're asking the board to do something about it, please understand, we're not the court of law for that.
Mr. Chairman, I fully understand your
Okay.
position. At the same time, you're being asked to make a decision on a development which you have had brought to your attention clearly raises an issue of rights. And I don't know how you can actually go ahead and make a decision when that issue is pending.
But we can't
So-
adjudicate whether
No, you
there's a
can't.
right or
But
not. We
you're-
have to
you're-
look at the special permit part of it. We cut the roads off and that's the end of it.
You are aware of an issue, and I don't know how you can approve a development where those rights are in question.
I
think
think we're.
If we don't approve it because there's a right, if there's a question of rights, they could sue us and they would win, because that's outside our jurisdiction.
I think town council is also going to take this up next week, and they're going to state, listen, you don't have the jurisdiction to approve this. If they say you do have the jurisdiction to approve this, if that's the position that we're going to take, then council is advising us, we have the right to approve this as written, and then it falls back to the private parties to work out any kind of confrontation that you have with that.
Correct.
Right.
And I'll just add that
So,
we were very much asked to try and negotiate with Richmond
Right.
these very issues.
Right.
The ball has not been picked up by the applicant for the development. So the fact that the deadline has been prolonged, I think, yes, it may be relevant, but it's not our it's not our problem.
Well, and we'd have to show you both sides of emails, and I don't appreciate
don't
it.
want
Yeah,
Right.
and really,
You don't need to go
but-
through that, and we don't need to get scolded. The fact of the matter is, we have every interest in making this settle. So if, if whatever is distracting that process, and I was trying to be generous in this, if there is a distraction, certainly we have every interest in making this happen. We had received from them, as I said,
Yeah.
a very substantial request for a mitigation payment, and we had to go through the due diligence to figure out if that was something we live with.
Okay, so I
You want any more
just-
facts?
They're just gonna put the roads right through because they have a right to put the
Right.
roads through.
I-
And that's why we asked them to negotiate the roads out of there, so you didn't have anybody going through. But they, at the very beginning, their attorney expressed the point of view at our meeting, it's a public meeting, that they had the right to cut both of those roads through and have those subdivisions access through those roads. We did not want that to happen, and they agreed to cut them off.
So,
That's as far as we can go.
Ms. Rowe, I hear you loud and clear at this point, and I think if I were sitting in your shoes, I'd now begin to start asking those same questions you asked me about 5-10 minutes ago. I think you can see what direction, and maybe it would be good to have their parties consulted as well through their appropriate legal channels to guide them in the process as
Right.
well. Because I feel like the board is being put into a position, I hear what you're saying,
A bad position, Barry.
but you're asking us you're asking us for something we can't necessarily accomplish with you. I can hear it, but your request keeps becoming the same thing, that we should just wait and see.
But Mr. Chairman, this is
Yes.
where frustration has come in. The outset of this process, you asked us to negotiate with them, come to an agreement. We
Yeah.
were trying to. We haven't got it, so now you're almost telling us
Your agreement in the end may well go beyond what this board has done, and depending upon what your agreement is, it gets settled between lawyers, and if not adequately, in a court of law, and the court of law decides if the planning board acted with prudence or not in the decision as well. And like I said, if they didn't, the court of law will decide that it gets remanded back to the court. That has happened before. Go ahead.
It's really important to point out a couple of things here, which is the mitigation we have responded to. We turned lots around to face Evergreen and increased the size from 5,000 square feet to 10,000 square feet as part of a request from the neighborhood.
Right.
We have provided a number of, and a series of things, including the elimination of the roads, to placate, to respond to. The only thing we haven't done is what you've required us to do, which is the footpath and the like.
Right.
The only other thing outstanding is this mitigation number and the decisions about the title.
We don't want to know.
Right.
Which is not in our purview.
Right. Everything that had to do with things in your purview, we responded to the T with what they requested. No negotiation. They asked, we gave.
Okay, I'm not gonna have this be a back and forth.
We have 9 minutes.
Were there other things that you wanted to bring up?
not
I
for
think-
myself, but I see one of my fellow trustees is Mr. Small.
We're in public hearing phase for the Sandpiper 2.
The lots of front on Evergreen.
Thank you.
No,
Yeah.
Well, no, that's part of it.
No, it's not. That was part of one.
Hold on.
This is way over to the right. There's nothing fronting on
We're
Evergreen.
on the other.
Oh, we're on two, right, sorry. I forgot we
So-
voted that.
Don't go back there.
Yeah, well, I'm ready to go home.
We need we've got to be out in 9 minutes.
I know.
We need
I
those,
know.
Catherine's trying to collect your nameplates.
So,
That was the easiest part of tonight.
So ship them on down, boys.
David, this is Paul. I'm sorry, we just have to be out of here by 6. Okay, thank you. Did anyone else want to comment on this? No? All right. So,
Catherine.
you guys are good at this point, Andrew, Leslie?
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
we've pretty much hammered things out.
So the meeting on Thursday will need to be at our conference room.
Okay, that's fine.
God, I hate that room.
4
Over
o'clock.
there.
Yeah,
Back over there.
That will be, we'll have the draft decision before
Yeah,
us.
yeah.
Yes. For Sandpiper 2.
but to me, that none of the legal stuff that they're having amongst each other,
Yeah, you
that's not part of what is gonna help me decide.
No.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to continue Sandpiper 2 and the, what's the other thing called?
Meadows?
Meadows 2 over to next Thursday at 4 o'clock at 2 Fairgrounds.
Okay.
Thank you very, very much.
Sounds like a plan.
Discussion, hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously.
Do I need to keep
Motion
this?
To adjourn.
For any reason.
Second.
Thank you.
Make that motion.
Jim, thanks, guys.
That was 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock. Thank you.